Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Macri, and today we will be going over the top ADP risers and fallers following the NFL draft, figuring out whether we're in or out on these updated ADPs. And joining me, as always, to help break it all down, the one and only Kate Magdziuk is here. Kate, how are you today?
I'm doing awesome. It's peak best ball season. It's OTA season. It's everybody's in the best shape of their life season. And as such, there are blurbs circulating among various beat reporters. There are various clips circulating on social media of guys not wearing pads, but in little shorts. And people love little shorts videos. Everybody loves a good little slant fade from Kyler Murray to Marvin Harrison Jr. Like nothing is real at this point in the off season. Everybody's in a great spot. So this is where we have to take every single thing we hear for a grain of salt. But like not everybody takes everything with a grain of salt. And we do see this reflected in best ball ADP. So what better time to see, like, are we buying into the hype from OTAs? Are we skeptical? Like this is a time where we have to have our noggin caps in full force because we're dodging false narratives left and right. And it what a time to be alive.
Yeah, it's overreaction season, right? That's basically where we're at here in the off season. Like you said, the camp videos circulating are just
So fun.
outrageous. Like they're yeah. At first, like I always enjoy them when they first come out, and then like after I see a couple, I'm like, what are we even doing? Like the throw from Trevor Lawrence to Brian Thomas Jr. wide open, like there's not a single defender on the field, and we can't be overreacting to that. I mean, it's insane, right? So yeah, we're gonna go over some of these post-draft NFL ADP risers and fallers here. We'll break them up by position, highlight some of the basically some of the non-rookie risers and fallers of relevance, right? And in order to kind of see how we feel about them and their new ADP, whether it makes sense to us, if we're in or out on them right now at cost and things of that nature, right? So we're going to use 4for4's handy underdog ADP tool and sort these guys from April 24th, which is the day before the NFL draft, until now. So just over a month's worth of data and changes in ADP since the NFL draft concluded in order to see where they ranked prior to the draft and what is now changed here post draft. So let's get her going here, starting at the running back position. Kate, I feel like most people, us included, we're expecting the Dallas Cowboys to draft a running back this year after
Or
losing
literally do
20,
anything at the running back position. I don't
literally
know,
anything.
John.
Yeah.
Like Jerry, make a move.
Didn't do it. Yeah, Tony Pollard gone in free agency. I mean, did nothing to replace him in free agency. 3 days of the NFL draft happened, still nothing. And then the draft ends and they get back together with their ex, Ezekiel Elliott, who now owns the top ADP for Cowboys running backs. So, Kate, with Dallas passing on running backs through the first like two key phases of the offseason here, these three risers, it's Ezekiel Elliott, who goes from RB62 pre-draft to RB40. Rico Dowdle goes from RB51 to RB43, and Deuce Vaughn goes from RB91 to RB78. Kind of expected, right? Since they didn't add, we expect these guys to rise if that was the case where they didn't add a running back. So now, do you have a favorite Dallas running back target right now based on these three values, or are you not interested in them for fantasy this year?
So here's the thing. If we're talking best ball, I do think Ezekiel Elliott's still probably the guy to roster here. And that's reflected here in the ADP. Obviously, going from RB62 ahead of the draft, RB40. I mean, that monstrous jump makes a ton of sense, especially considering he wasn't even signed with the Dallas Cowboys before the draft. So, like, yeah, you're going to expect that big rise. Now, I do want to, like, note Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, like washed, right? And I don't think anybody has any question marks about that. In 2023, 69.2 PFF rushing grade, averages 3.5 yards per attempt. You know, not great in terms of missed forced tackle rate, just 13%. Averages 2.53 yards after contact per attempt. That ranked 47th among 57 qualifying running backs. Like pretty much every metric you could look at for Ezekiel Elliott, um, it's not good. Ranked dead last among qualifying running backs in breakaway run rate. Like, he is hashtag watched. But
Mhm.
what I do want to point out is the fact that the Dallas Cowboys are still a top 5 offense in the league, right? They are still going to be a offense that's going to score a lot of points. They led the league last year in red zone plays. They led the league in terms of goal line plays. Who are we going to project to get those very valuable touches? It's going to be Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah. I was gonna say obviously Deuce Vaughn, but no.
I'm like better than Deuce Vaughn. I'm not Ezekiel Elliott. And
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, put me in, coach. Put me in, Mike McCarthy. I can do it.
Yeah.
Probably have a similar skill as a pass blocker too. Like, you could swap me one for one. I'm just kidding. Deuce Vaughn, you're a very talented human being. You're just small.
Small.
But I do think that, like, generally speaking, I don't want to really roster any of these running backs, but if you had to pick one, I don't think they're going to necessarily give, Ezekiel Elliott 250 touches, but I do think the maybe 150 touches that they give him are going to be in very strategic and key situations that are going to be conducive to scoring a lot of fantasy points. Who was it that who am I thinking of with the Patriots like several years back? Like was it LeGarrette Blount who just
Oh,
fell
sure.
for like 18 touchdowns in a season just like coincidentally? Like I could picture Ezekiel Elliott having a ridiculously productive season as a touchdown scorer, averaging a very high average of fantasy points per touch, while also being one of the least efficient true runners when it comes to like every other metric.
Yeah, no, I think we're
I feel gross. I
perfectly
feel dirty. I need a shower.
it's
I don't know.
but no, I hear you, like, it's nothing crazy, like RB40, right? And we know what he is. We know he's not the Zeke of 2019 anymore or anything like that, but I think we're looking at it the exact same way, right? Because if there's one role I expect Dallas to utilize him in, it again, being a very good scoring offense, it's gonna be around the goal line, and I think he's gonna provide the most fantasy value of that bunch because of that role. And, like, even New England, like they saw the value in him in those situations last year where him and Ramondre Stevenson, they split those goal to goal carries right down the middle while Stevenson was still healthy. All three of Zeke's rushing touchdowns last year came in goal to go situations. Like, we're drafting him as an RB4 here, I'm pretty sure is going to be the team's go to option in those situations. So I think he's going to get a decent amount of opportunities there. And yeah, it's a fine value, right? RB40. I mean, we're drafting him as an RB4. We're not going to feel great about starting him every week, but if we have to, we're going to hope that he falls into the end zone, like you said, and anything else on top of that, it is going to be a bonus. I mean, usually I'd like to when it's these ambiguous kind of situations and there's like a washed veteran running back like an Ezekiel Elliott at the top of the depth chart, like I'm fine kind of scooping up the value later. But I mean, if you want to add a Dowdle or a Vaughn for insurance, like later in drafts, then that's fine. But yeah, I don't want to be rostering multiple Cowboys running backs. I'll just take the shot on Zeke and then hope that he stays healthy and hope that he maintains that goal line role, because that's where the value is going to be.
My biggest question right now, and I think this is probably one of the most pertinent questions, especially for those that are participating in these off-season best ball drafts. Do you think there is a is this the backfield that they are actually going to be starting? Because I'm looking at the situation, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, there has to be other answers. And I keep going back to this idea like they need to trade for somebody. I
Mhm.
think they need a true efficient presence. Imagine if like they traded for like a James Conner, right? Who is coming off a fan freaking tastic season. We're gonna actually talk about him here in a little bit here in a different segment of this show. But I feel like they can't be done. And maybe I'm just being like a fool, but maybe the answer is still none of these guys. And maybe, I don't know. There were rumors about a potential market for Najee Harris before the Steelers declined his 5th-year option. Like maybe they're not done at the running back position, and all of these guys will be fool's errands. But yeah, the crappy part is they're gonna score so many points in the running back. Whoever gets the touches will have some very valuable touches here in the coming season.
Mhm. Yeah, I think as long as like Zeke specifically, like as long as his ADP doesn't get out of hand, like I think at RB40, like it is what it is. It's a perfect, it's like a fine value, right? It's a low risk kind of thing where, if he doesn't contribute to your roster, you can replace him in season. I mean, best ball, you're kind of you're stuck with him, right? But I yeah, I think there's there's always the possibility they could add to the position. I mean, the offseason is long. Injuries happen as well, so we'll see what happens. There could be other free agents out there. Kareem Hunt's still floating around as usual, and yeah, trades maybe. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, I'm fine with Zeke right now, kind of at cost, but I'm not excited about it and not looking to continue adding him if that ADP keeps rising.
Very fair.
Let's talk about another running back who probably the biggest like veteran winner of the NFL draft because it's Zamir White of the Las Vegas Raiders who goes from RB31 pre-draft to RB21. The Raiders did not take a Josh Jacobs replacement, nor did they sign a true threat in free agency, which includes Alexander Madison. The final 4 weeks of last season, I mean, Zamir White was relied on heavily for the Raiders. Like no running back carried the ball more than White over that span of the final 4 games, 84 carries during that span. And as a result, he ranked third in rushing yards over those final 4 games and finished as the RB9 in that stretch. Now, he did that while not necessarily being overly efficient with his touches, mind you. Like he with running backs that had at least 25 carries over that span, he ranked 16th in rushing grade, tied for 33rd in missed tackles forced per attempt. He was 29th in first down and touchdown rate. Just had the one touchdown over that span. But the
To be fair,
Raiders,
the Raiders weren't scoring a whole ton
exactly.
of touchdowns in that span, so, like, I'm gonna give them a pass on that one. But, like, I
It
I
could
do
be an
think,
issue again this year, right?
yeah, I mean, yeah, I can't really project that they're gonna take a huge leap in that
Right.
regard, but I do think that, like, Zamir White generally just he's got some juice and, not necessarily, a top-end rushing grade, did average 4.7 yards per carry,
Mhm.
3.4 yards after contact per attempt, which I'm gonna be honest, kind of impresses me. Just again, given the offensive situation that they found themselves in at that time. Um, but you know what? Volume is king. And looking at this depth chart, right? You mentioned the signing of Alexander Madison. They have Amir Abdullah, drafted Dylan Lobby, who could have a role as maybe the primary third down back if he wins this out over Amir Abdullah. But like when you're looking at which of these guys is the best pure runner on the team, it's got to be Zamir White. I don't think like for dynasty, specifically, I haven't been overly, anxious to target him in trades just because there's some I think long-term questions about his viability of, from a health perspective, is he really a two contract kind of running back? But like from a redraft standpoint, I mean, Zamir White could very, very reasonably, if healthy, project to be like top 10 among running back in total
Mhm.
touches in 2024. And it's like we don't even care. Like
It's
volume
a
is
it
king, even if it's
it
not
absolutely is.
the most efficient offense, which I mean, like how much better is this offense than it was last year? It, it's not, right?
Right,
Like
yeah. It's not, it's yeah, it's definitely not that much better, if at all. And look, like you said, I like Zamir White, for this year. You mentioned, dynasty value, whatever. He might not even be like a 2-year running back, but for this year, I'm perfectly fine with him. I mean, the Raiders proved it last year. Like they were nothing if not stubborn with their running back deployment last year, rolling out Josh Jacobs at a high rate despite his inefficiency, right? And then
Yep.
basically did the same thing with Zamir White. He was a little bit better, but they didn't really have any other option. And once again, this year, they don't really have any other option. So yeah, I'd expect them to kind of remain consistent with that usage and that volume. I think this is a perfectly fine range for him to be going, and I like him a fair bit, and I'll probably scoop up some quite a few Zamir White shares this year as well. Like he's not necessarily like a great value. He's not necessarily a great running back, but like you said, is he likely to get the volume that we care about more than anything else for fantasy? Yeah, I'd say he is. So it's a
Average just under 24 touches per game in his 4-game stint as the starter
mhm.
last year. Like, if you're telling me any running back is going to get 21 carries per game, that's probably going to be a top 15 running back. And again, average just over 4.7 yards per carry, 17 game pace, kind of ridiculous. I know I just love a good 17 game pace. Was on pace for almost 1,700 rushing yards. So, like, I don't know. I'm every time I'm like progressing through these lists, I keep wanting to pass on Zamir White, and then I look again, RB21, and I think of that volume. If he's going to average, not like, let's say there's some regression there. Like, let's say not 21 carries per game, but like 15 carries per game. Again, that's probably a top 15 running back. Like,
Mhm.
that's great value.
It is. And look, I mean, we make fun of Josh Jacobs for being inefficient last year, but again, with that volume during those first 14 weeks of the season before he got injured, he was RB12, right? So it's opportunity. That is the main thing that we're always going to come back for these running backs. And if Zamir White isn't as efficient as he was last year, which even wasn't amazing, but like if he's just Josh Jacobs levels of efficient, but still getting that volume, like that's still very much a startable running back for fantasy purposes this year. So I definitely like the position where he's being drafted. I'd be fine with him there.
Let's go. Zamir White. We got to
Samir
get a
White.
jersey or something.
Oh, that'd be fun. Yeah,
It
we can
won't be
hang him
worth
next to the.
anything
It
in
won't be anything after this year.
2025 and
Yeah.
beyond, but
Yeah, it'll be fun for 2024. That's the main thing. So, all right, let's talk about another running back who, similarly to White in Las Vegas, the Cincinnati Bengals also lost their top running back this past year, and they've relied on him heavily in past seasons. That was Joe Mixon, and well, they also didn't really address the position in the draft. They didn't bring in a running back who was also fed a ton. Uh, or they did bring in a running back who was fed a ton last season, and that was Zach Moss when he was starting with the Colts. He rises from RB34 to RB26. So, Kate, I'll let you start with Zach Moss because we know you are the Zach Moss truther here on the podcast, even though I do like him as well.
I'm just gonna say I've always loved Zach Moss. It just so happened that I was like 18 years too early. So um that's fine. I'm not gonna hold on to that too much. But I like looking at the kind of timing, right? They were very um, you know, the Bengals were in a position where they knew that they were going to have, an opportunity to save a lot of money against the cap. They have T. Higgins playing on this franchise tag. They're trying to get a deal done, maybe sort of. They need to get a deal done for Jamar Chase. Like, they needed money, and I think they kind of looked at Joe Mixon at this point in his career as kind of this expendable loss. But the timing of how quickly they just scooped Zach Moss up, and the play style that he has in terms of this guy who I think he's one of these sort of wear and tear running backs. Chase Brown adds this element of explosion and speed to the offense, but I just think that Zach Moss is the better running back. And even looking at their rushing profiles, I know Chase Brown had some exciting moments, but in almost every statistical category, Zach Moss, was the more efficient running back in 2023. I don't think that the Bengals sign a guy like Moss if you don't plan to give him carries, because I think it's become really evident throughout his professional career that he is his best self when he is in a volume-based role because of his physical running style, right? Like, he is a guy that will wear down opposing defenses. That's not Chase Brown's game, but I also don't think that you make this direct pursuit for that type of running back if you're not planning to give him volume.
Mhm. I'm with you. And look, we kind of saw that last year with the Colts when Jonathan Taylor was out, right? And whether the Bengals deploy him in the exact same kind of volume heavy role, we'll find out. And Indianapolis was definitely like a more uh, above average team in run rate last year. The Bengals were bottom three, so I don't think we immediately expect like 19 carries per game, which is what he was getting across the 8 games that he started last year. So it was really high volume. Joe Mixon, he was closer to 15 per game, which still good, right? And then you factor in that maybe they don't view Moss in the same regard as they did Mixon. I think they do like Chase Brown a fair bit last year. They did factor him in as well with Mixon still in the lineup, but I think for Moss, like we're probably looking at something like 12 to 14 carries per game while being the favorite for the red zone and goal to go opportunities, which again, Cincinnati, a good offense here, which we expect those opportunities to continue to be at a high rate. And then they were also very consistent in giving those goal to go opportunities to Joe Mixon last year. I think they can do the
We
same.
saw 100% of those opportunities.
Absolutely,
100,
right?
literally 100%.
Yeah,
Like,
so it they are, again, a consistent team as far as that red zone usage goes and a goal to go situation. So I love that for Zach Moss. RB 26 right now, like we said, he's going after Najee Harris, after Jonathan Brooks, after Jalen Warren. I kind of love that for Moss. Like that's an ADP I could be all in on for sure.
yeah, and again, just because I have maybe this total bias toward Zach Moss, I do like Chase Brown, but
Mhm.
like looking at the way that the Bengals deployed Chase Brown, who, again, had sort of these moments of burst within the offense, even in the red zone, 7 total red zone carries to Joe Mixon's 59. And again, inside the 5, Joe Mixon saw 100% of those carries inside the 5. Not a single other player had a carry inside the 5-yard line in terms of skill position players. Like, I think it's pretty clear that, like, if they wanted to test Chase Brown in those situations, they probably would. Chase Brown did have a fairly high stuff rate last year,
Mhm.
which I don't think really helps in terms of making the case for him to be this key goal line guy. And I think that those particularly valuable touches, while Zach Moss and Chase Brown might even project to split, those carries, you know, in the middle of the field more evenly. I do think when they get into these crucial situations, Moss is going to be the guy, much like a Ezekiel Elliott's probably going to be the guy for the Dallas Cowboys. And those are the most valuable touches the running backs are going to have on the football field, period.
Yep, I am absolutely with you there. I really like the ADP right now for Zach Moss. So let's talk about some running back fallers now. So these are guys that obviously drafters have devalued post NFL draft for reasons we'll get into here. And I think we will start with one of the more obvious cases of, first rookie running back drafted equals bad for current running backs on the roster. So Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders of the Carolina Panthers drop. Chuba Hubbard goes from RB 39 in ADP to RB 54. Miles Sanders goes from RB 60 to RB 76. Jonathan Brooks, meanwhile, is RB 24. So I think this is the interesting conversation here, right? Because for Brooks, you're taking him at RB 24 for the potential upside, right? Where if he hits, if he's given the ideal volume in the offense, scores at a decent rate, maybe even gets involved in the pass game as a receiving back, like there's huge upside to bet on here. And I think I'm fine, taking a swing on it, depending on maybe the build of the rest of my team. Like within those first 9 to 10 rounds of drafts, I'll probably allow myself like a max of like 2 high risk, high reward type picks where, it's no more than a couple roster spots that I'm really depending on those guys hitting and knowing that they'll have a lower floor as well. So there's definitely some riskier bets to make here within these first 10 rounds, mostly rookies. So, if I've taken my rookie swings to this point, already, I might be out on Brooks at this cost. But if not, and I only have one rookie or something like that, then sure, I take the swing depending on how the board looks. But that being said, like RB24 for Jonathan Brooks is pretty risky with guys like Zach Moss, Tony Pollard, James Conard, who are proven starters, who are already locked into volume across the board here as well. Like,
and who are not coming off torn ACLs.
that's
Like
part of it, right?
that's also got to be a part of that conversation with Jonathan Brooks, who, like I said a lot. I have been, my new crush Trey Benson, but like
Mhm.
I've said all off season long. If you've been listening along with us for a while here on the PFF Fantasy Pod, Jonathan Brooks has been my guy. I think he is the most well-rounded prospect here in this class. I think he's got just the perfect blend of finesse, vision, receiving skill set, pass blocking. Like he is the most complete running back in this class. So, like from a talent perspective, I'm not worried about the volume whatsoever. I think he steps into that offense day one. He is the best running back on the field. The only question is the health component. And every indication has been that like he's, on pace to be ready for the season, probably going to be ready for training camp by the sounds of it. But like he's missing, all of these spring programs, he's missing OTAs. Um, these can be kind of these crucial reps for rookies, especially as they're integrating into these pro style offenses. I'm not sure that I'm necessarily scared about like the skill set. It's just these question marks of like how quickly are they going to be able to ramp him up after
Mhm.
missing the spring programs? If he misses any portion of training camp, like if they truly view him as the future, for their running back position, which I think they do based on the draft capital, based on the talent, I have to envision that they're not going to be like, all right, day one, you were cleared for contact. Let's run you into the ground 22 times a game. Like,
Yeah, this is the thing, right? Like, again, coming off the torn ACL, we've seen that be like a precursor to slow starts plenty of times as well, right? So he's also, again, he's a rookie who, again, might not get those early reps in camp, and he doesn't have as much starting experience coming out of college as well. Just 1 year as a
great point.
starter, right? So there's no guarantee that he hits the ground running here in year one. And with this offense too, like despite, upgrading from last year, it's still likely to be a below average offense in the league. So how much, high value opportunities he gets specifically around the goal line perhaps is probably not likely to be high either. So as much as I believe in him long term as well, like, and maybe even like starting in the second half of his rookie season and then beyond, it's just an unlikely bet, I think, for me to make at RB24 with some of the others that we just mentioned also on the board there. So I
Here's
mean,
what I
Chuba
think we
Hubbard.
could actually do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Pass on him at that draft cost, right? And then
Mhm.
there's going to be, I think, inevitably a point, and this is if things kind of play out the way that I'm no clairvoyant, but if things play out the way that I'm picturing them, he gets off to this slow start. Fantasy managers are very impatient, right? And especially because he is a rookie, you don't necessarily have the perspective of like, oh, well, he's just ramping up. It like the narrative will start to be like, oh, maybe he's not as good. Maybe he's not when like I can just picture this narrative spinning wildly out of control. And then you swoop in to whichever sucker drafted him at this ADP and you trade for him.
Yeah. I think that works as well, right? Like I'm definitely more in on Chuba Hubbard at RB54 than I am at Jonathan Brooks at RB24. Like it's just way better value. I think especially early in the year, like Chuba Hubbard is, I think, the favorite, I think, to get those touches right away. Brooks, sure, if he's healthy and if he meshes well with the offense right away in camp and he gets that practice time, all that kind of things, it can absolutely happen. Again, the high upside reason that we're betting on him at RB24, or drafters are at least, is for that potential to be a workhorse and long term here for the season. But I think for Hubbard, the more likely scenario is that he does get more of the work for the first half of the season at the very least, right? And then if he's fine and effective with those touches, then that makes his ADP well worth it. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I'm probably taking my high risk, high reward swings elsewhere than Jonathan Brooks right now, but I can definitely see the reason why people would take a swing on him.
Here's the thing too, looking at this Carolina Panthers backfield, like I've gone to bat for them all off season long, saying that like they did a pretty solid job of kind of rebuilding this offense with the limited draft
Mhm.
capital, with what it felt like they had nothing going into this season, right? And I think generally speaking, the way that they've transformed the roster and the offense has been favorable for Bryce Young. I still don't project this to be a offense that's going to score, rank top 15 in scoring. So like I'm actually probably closer to the point that like the answer is none of these running backs cuz maybe they use a rotation, maybe they use Chuba Hubbard as the primary back to start the year. Who knows? But like, how valuable are those touches going to be? Like, at least for Ezekiel Elliott and taking that swing, like there's going to be points scored, and he's probably going to be the primary back in that situation. Like being the primary back for a team like the Panthers is less valuable to me overall, unless you are Jonathan Brooks and you're fully healthy, than it is for I'd rather a less efficient and less talented runner be getting, prime goal line carries with the Dallas Cowboys. Like, I'm closer to saying the answer is none.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I'm with you. I'm not a big believer in the offense taking like a huge leap this year. So
You know what's bad when I'm going to bat for Ezekiel Elliott over the Carolina Panthers running backs. And to be clear, again, love Jonathan Brooks, love his long-term outlook.
Mhm.
I think when he is fully healthy and when he is the primary back, he is adding an element to this offense that they don't have with any of these other running backs. So it's more a question of like Jonathan Brooks or nothing for me. And even Jonathan Brooks, like that ADP is just a little bit too spicy for me.
It's rich. It's rich right now. Yeah. So I'm with you there. How about another effect of a rookie running back being drafted causing a little bit of a fall here? So James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals goes from RB 20 to RB 28. The team drafted Trey Benson. Obviously, he's actually at RB 30 right now. They took him in the third round of the draft. I love Trey Benson. He was my pre-draft RB 1, but James Conner falling this much feels like an overcorrection to me. Like people might not realize because Arizona wasn't very good last year, and Trey McBride obviously stole a lot of the spotlight, but Connor was really, really good last season, right? Like set new career highs in rushing grade with an 88.4. That was a top 5 mark in the league. His yards per carry, 5.0, tied for 6th. Yards after contact per attempt, 3.93. That was second in the league. And 0.29 missed tackles forced per attempt was also second. So he was doing that with just 21.4% of his total rushing yards coming before contact, which is the 6th lowest mark in the league. Like, meaning he wasn't necessarily getting the offensive line help of others either, right? Like, he was awesome. 29 years old. Yeah, he's had some injury issues, sure. But to me, like, that's a fine reason, I think, to move Benson up in ADP, but not enough necessarily for me to move Connor down in ADP, especially this much where he's being drafted now as an RB 3. How about you? Where are you at with this Arizona backfield right now?
So actually, just this week, I posted an article over on Pro Football Focus about 5 dynasty players that I think are going to see the biggest increase in value over the course of the 2024 season. Trey Benson was on this list, and I'm still all in on James Conner. That's how much I'm a believer in what James Conner did. Now, I've always been a huge James Conner fan. Ignore the terrible towel waving behind my head. I like James Conner. I like his running style. I think he's so tough. And seeing what he did last year, I mean, it kind of just you forgot that he was, like on the RB age cliff. Now,
Mhm.
the biggest question for me is like, can he stay healthy? Right? He's played 13 or fewer games in all but one season dating back to 2018. So when I feel like it's more of a when than an if. When he gets injured, fingers crossed that he doesn't. I never wish for it, but like Trey Benson is absolutely going to shine. But I still think this is James Conner's backfield, and he is coming off, as you mentioned, with all of those efficiency metrics.
Mhm.
By every standard, this was a career year for James Conner. Like, I think it's his job to lose, and I don't think we should overcorrect, even as much as I like Trey Benson, who I'm gonna project, like, my bold prediction here for Trey Benson is that, like, this time next season, we could be looking at him as a top 12 dynasty running back. That's how much I like Trey Benson, and I still think this fall for James Conner is disrespectful.
It feels like it, right? Like I think, there's definitely a case like I think Benson's going to work in. That's bound to happen to an extent even while Connor's healthy, right? But, to Arizona's credit, like when Connor was in the lineup last year, like he was their clear go-to running back and there wasn't really anyone else that even so much as sniffed the field. Like 16 carries per game when he was in the lineup. That includes week 5 when he left with an injury. Amari DiMercato was basically the closest after him at just over 3 carries per game, which includes that week 5 game when he filled in for Connor and had 10 carries himself. So, yeah, injury, age concerns, I think they're fine to factor in, but I think more so in favor of taking a shot on Trey Benson, potentially to handcuff Connor. But I still really like James Conner, especially at cost now at RB28, considering that he looked really, really good last year. So I will take that swing for sure.
Yeah, almost 80% of the running back rush attempts here in this offense. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, like, I think this price for James Conner, again, just kind of feels disrespectful because we not only know the talent, right? And I
Mhm.
think we are all in agreement that this is James Conner's job to lose. This is also going to be a much better offense than what we saw here in 2024 or than 2023. Like with, you know, a healthy Kyler Murray with a real NFL caliber wide receiver, who is going to absolutely blow the top off this offense with the breakout of Trey McBride. Like, you look at all of these fantasy options, and I look at the fact that, like, James Conner was already one of the most productive running backs in the league last year. Like, you've gotta be projecting for an increase in total scoring for this team that is going to be conducive to scoring fantasy points for the running backs as well.
Yeah. With you there for sure. Let's talk quickly about well, not like a huge fall here in ADP, but another NFL veteran who did have a rookie added to his backfield is Josh Jacobs of the Green Bay Packers. Now he went from RB9 to RB11. I'm not like overly interested in this one. We'll see if you are. I'm fine with the adjustment here, really. I mean, RB9 was probably a bit too rich for me, anyways, considering he was about like RB7 in ADP last year, and we know he was really ineffective on the field. But again, first 14 weeks of the year, he was RB12 still. Like he wasn't amazing by any means, but volume was his calling card, and I think it still can be here in Green Bay. It should be on a good offense. So, he'll get a chance to convert those touchdowns that we've been talking about, maybe more so than last year, but don't think that overall volume will necessarily be as high as it was in Las Vegas. I think they got guys there that they will also utilize. AJ Dillon, obviously still on the team, but also the spending a day 2 pick on a Marshawn Lloyd is going to factor in as well. So RB11, probably fine with it, to be honest, for Josh Jacobs. How about you? Any strong feelings for this one?
I don't have a ton of strong feelings. I do think the drafting of Marshawn Lloyd is definitely what's, factoring into the mix
Mhm.
here. I do think Marshawn Lloyd probably more of, a move for the future. If you look at the way Josh Jacobs' contract is structured, it really can work out to be kind of a 1-year loaner deal. And I wouldn't be surprised, like he's due, I think like almost a 600 or $6 million roster bonus at the start of 2025, like in March of 2025. So like he feels like a 1-year loaner. I think they'll be fine to give him plenty of volume. So like I just look at Lloyd as more of a long-term play here.
Mhm.
It, and here's the thing about Josh Jacobs is, coming off of this disappointing, inefficient season, and now he is probably playing, and I'm going to make I don't know if this is a bold opinion or not, but like this is the best offense he's ever played with. And so maybe he doesn't need the amount of volume that he needed with a Raiders offense, let's say. Maybe he doesn't need that same level of volume to achieve some of those, general milestones. I mean, looking at the Packers in general last year and, their overall trajectory in the offense, they ranked 3rd in terms of total red zone plays. Um, Again, maybe kind of like a similar to what we said about the Dallas Cowboys, maybe having this kind of role, just, you know, being the sheer primary back on a really good offense, like that might in and of itself make it worth his ADP. And I don't know. I'm struggling with Josh Jacobs, man. I really am.
Yeah, like I think there's definitely a case to be made for him. Like I think he won't be as bad, at least efficiency wise, as he was last year in Las
I think
Vegas.
just sheer like based on the offense, right? He
Yeah,
has
yeah.
to be better.
Right, exactly, and then that definitely plays a part into it, right? Like we know running backs, for the most part, are a product of the system that they play in and the players around them as well, right? So that is going to help in Josh Jacobs' favor. The same thing with the touchdown total. I think he's going to have more opportunities there in Green Bay as well. It's just a matter of what the volume is going to be like with those other guys on the roster, specifically Marshawn Lloyd. But I'm fine with him at the back end of RB1 here. Probably feel better about him as a high end RB2, but if I have him as my RB1, I'm hoping that my wide receivers are going to carry me a little bit more. So, um, let's go on to another disappointing and inefficient running back from last season. Continues his fall from grace here. Austin Eckler, now of the Washington Commanders, goes from RB30 to RB35. This was a guy that was RB2 just a season ago in ADP, to now a low end RB3. And as someone who was burned bad by Eckler last year, I get it. But Kate, this is such a massive drop off now that continues to happen post draft here. Is it too much of a drop off for you for Eckler, or are you okay with this newly assigned value for him?
I'm gonna be honest. I am kind of okay with
Mhm.
this evaluation for him. And there are a few reasons why, I have question marks about Austin Eckler and his value, right? He is on the older side for a running back. So, like that in and of itself, we know that there's sort of this running back age cliff where, we see a decline in overall efficiency, overall production. He's 29 years old. He's going into this Washington offense that, you know, Jaden Daniels, we're going to probably project him to, take less of these kind of, check down passes to the running back position just based on his propensity for running and his natural athleticism. Like that adage that these Russian quarterbacks, will often opt to use their legs as opposed to the check down option. That makes me nervous. Like that makes me nervous for Austin Eckler, especially when I think they have a pretty solid, running back in Brian Robinson to function as sort of the primary first and second down option. Like
Yep.
there's a lot going on in this offense. I find it much more likely that Austin Eckler is like a much better version of what Antonio Gibson functioned as in this offense. It's just how valuable is that role going to be in this offense moving forward?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And I'm with you. I'm fine with the ADP for Eckler. I'm probably still not drafting him, to be honest. Like again, the main factor I think is going to be that you have Jaden Daniels at quarterback. Like this is a highly motivated runner at the quarterback position coming into start now. Like he's much rather going to scramble and take off than dump off to his running back. He's going to eat a lot of that opportunity that made Eckler so valuable over the years, right? And then, like you said, Brian Robinson's there, who was a better running back than Eckler last season. He's also being drafted ahead of Eckler on Underdog, not on Sleeper though. So people are kind of split on that one. But yeah, to me, like think when he first signed with Washington, like not knowing the quarterback situation, I think there was potential for me to kind of consider him like I don't want to say low end RB2, probably more high end RB3, but with Daniels at quarterback, I think it does hurt Eckler's opportunity. He was already bad last year, like you said, again, getting older as well. It wasn't just like a slight decline in play, but he was legitimately not good. He was essentially outside or on the fringes of top 50 at best in most rushing metrics. So yeah, RB3 at best for me, and maybe not even that. And I'd rather draft Brian Robinson.
LSU had 40 total targets to the running back position last year. 40 total targets. That was tied for 143rd, which not great. Not
Yeah,
not what you'd want.
yeah,
I don't
it's not
know.
looking likely for Eckler.
And again, this is I love Austin Eckler, the player, and even like from a financial standpoint, they didn't invest a ton in Austin Eckler. It just feels kind of like this is the cliff that we were kind of waiting for Austin Eckler. And if he were in another offense that I would project heavier usage for in terms of, a potential target share, then I probably wouldn't mind Austin Eckler at this ADP whatsoever. But coming off a year where you averaged 3.5 yards per carry. And again, this is an offense that had plenty of its own struggles, but like definitely think, lost a step in terms of what he can contribute as like a first and second down runner. I hate to say, yeah, I'm out.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
like Austin Eckler's the type of running back though. Like I never want to be out on him because he's just he's super freaking talented and maybe in any other situation like I can think of 10 teams I'd rather send him to where I think he could probably be a contributor at this ADP, but Commanders isn't it.
I'm with you. I don't think it's the Commanders either. I just it's not a great fit right now. And then based on what we saw last year from him, it just feels it doesn't feel like he's going to turn it around this season. So let's talk about another running back and another rookie running back that was drafted here. So the Los Angeles Rams took Blake Corum, and that bumped down Kyron Williams' draft capital a little bit. He goes from RB5 to RB7. He's also dealing with a foot injury as well. So, the drop, I think makes sense, right? Even considering just how good he was last year, like still a fifth round running back, and Corum now I think has more of an investment made in him in terms of draft capital. I still believe Kyron is the clear RB1 here, but I don't think that it will be nearly as clear as that was last year when he basically dominated touches, right? He ranked 13th in the league in carries, and he only played 12 games. Now you got Mike LaFleur coming in as the new offensive coordinator as well. Last we saw him with the Jets in 2022, he did like to split up his carries a little bit more with that team. There was a lower opportunity rate there for the RB1 in that Jets offense, a little bit more for the RB2 there. I think it was 52% for RB1 as far as team carries go on a weekly basis, and it was about 27% for RB2 on a weekly basis. So both of those being below average for the RB1 and a little bit above average for RB2. So, Kate, Kyron Williams gets Blake Corum added to the backfield here. Still a top 10 running back in ADP. We love him, obviously, for what he did last year, but how are you feeling about him going into 2024 now?
So here's the thing. I actually am less concerned about the addition of Blake Corum. I think that, they drafted Blake Corum, per Sean McVay because, how much he reminds them of the type of player that Kyron Williams is. Like that in and of itself, a huge compliment. Where I get concerned is Kyron Williams' propensity for injuries. Now, he's had these lower body injuries now coming into OTAs. Kyron's having a little bit of a foot issue, and he's going to miss probably a good chunk of the offseason program. They, at least the spring program here. Sean McVay says he's expected to be ready for training camp. But again, these are all these kind of valuable reps, with a team that, I think Blake Corum, a very talented running back and a guy that, I think has very much proven himself capable of having this, 3 down role. They're asking him to kind of expand his route running a little bit, expand his skill set. I'm more worried about the Kyron Williams injury
Mhm.
creating more opportunity for Blake Corum than I am just based on the fact at face value that the Rams drafted Blake Corum. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, I think so.
it's
It
gonna create
also
opportunity that might
yeah.
not have otherwise been his.
It absolutely does, right? And Blake Corum, he's no like schlub at the running back position, right? Like he's a very good college prospect at the position. He was our highest graded running back, I think, for the entire PFF college era, right? So he's very good. I think, if he's starting to get those opportunities, the one thing that, he did well at was just being a positive running the ball. Like he wasn't necessarily great at being a breakaway runner or anything like that, but every time he touched the ball, he was
He
doing
falls forward.
he
Like,
falls forward, exactly, and he picks up the yardage that the team needs him to get, and I think that's valuable to NFL teams for the position, more so than just being a boom or bust type running back, right? And not saying that Kyron Williams is that either, but that could lead to opportunities for a Blake Corum, especially if Kyron Williams is missing time in practice, things like that, where Corum is getting those reps and working into the offense a little bit more. So I'm with you. I still believe in Kyron Williams as a starting running back this year for fantasy purposes, but he definitely becomes a little bit more risky now as these injury issues start to pop up as well, and with Blake Corum now kind of poking his head in and out of the backfield here. So yeah, let's talk one more running back situation. And again, this is post NFL draft. And obviously, the guys that are falling usually have a rookie running back being added to their backfield as a reason for that. And that is once again the case here with Raheem Mostert going from RB21 pre draft to RB29. They drafted Jalen Wright. It was in the 4th round. But this is also a team that distributed their touches for the running backs a fair bit last year, right? With Devon Achan, he's obviously going to continue to get opportunities, but similar to James Conner in a way is Raheem Mostert to me in that he was like amazing last year, even as an older back. Like this dude is now 32 years old, and he was a top 3 graded running back just last year. He set a new career high 91.1 rushing grade. We just don't see that. And, he wasn't relied on heavily on as heavily as James Conner was in Arizona, but, close to 14 carries per game, couple targets per game. They like him, and he's still very clearly good at what he does. Now,
they
Devon
also just got
Achan,
rid of a 2-year extension, which
exactly.
just this offseason tells you they plan on him being
Yeah.
a part of the offense. Like, this one's
They believe in
interesting.
him. Yeah,
They do.
they do believe in him, and the discrepancy in ADP right now, Devon Achan is RB8. So, if I have the choice between Achan at RB8, Mostert at RB29, I mean, give me Mostert there. How are you feeling about these two?
Well, I just highlighted last week 5 bold predictions for the 2023 or the 2024 fantasy
Mhm.
season. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm out on HN for sure at that ADP. My bold prediction for the season to come: Devin HN finishes as an RB3 or worse. So that's RB24 or lower. I think the fact that they brought Raheem Mostert back on this 2-year deal is absolutely key. You mentioned Jalen Wright, who like I was very skeptical about in the pre-draft process coming out of Tennessee, didn't really have experience facing stacked boxes. One wasn't efficient in the very few opportunities he had in such situations. I'm going to be honest, looking at, the team he landed with for in terms of scheme, it's going to be really hard to stack the box here against any of their running backs, right?
Mhm.
But you even look at the draft capital, right? He's a 4th round running back. They actually traded a 2025 3rd round pick to be able to move up and go get Jalen Wright, which tells me like they also really like Jalen Wright. And
Yeah.
I could kind of picture this entire backfield being a mess, but in terms of projecting a guy for 2024, I want Raheem Mostert out of this entire group when everybody was healthy in that offense, and that wasn't necessarily a super consistent aspect of their running back room here in 2023. But when healthy, it was Raheem Mostert who was the primary starting running back, and I feel like that kind of spoke all the volume that you need, right? And he started every single one of the games that he played last year, except for the last 2 weeks where he missed due to injury. Came back and again, just had a much higher volume role. Had 10 plus carries in all but 3 games last year, including the playoffs. Like when it came from when they were in a volume based situation, it was Raheem Mostert that they were looking at. And the fact that they gave him another 2-year extension tells me that they're looking at Raheem Mostert and they're not thinking that he looks like a 32-year-old running back. I like the scheme, everything plays into their hands. You look at even the opportunity for carries inside the 5-yard line, obviously an area that Raheem Mostert was extremely efficient in last season. Saw 20 of those carries inside the 5 compared to Devin Achane at just 5 carries inside the 5. Like, everything's telling me that it's Raheem Mostert's job. So, what are we doing?
Yeah, this is it feels like, right, because we're obviously still, not far removed from the NFL draft where we're all very much in like dynasty mode right now, right? Where yeah, Devon Achane for sure. You want him over Raheem Mostert for dynasty purposes, but this is a huge gap in ADP that I just don't know if I can get behind. Like even if Raheem Mostert, falls off a cliff, or if slash when his touches are reduced maybe in favor of Achan a little bit more, which I think people are expecting here, and I think that's fair, but it doesn't sting as much if he doesn't hit compared to if Achan only gets, a slight bump in touches. And even then, I don't think he's, like you said, gonna be their lead back at the goal line, at least. Like we saw that last year with Mostert, like you laid out. And, you're looking at a sub 200-pound, 5'8" Devin Achan. Mostert, he's not big either, but he's bigger than
He's
Achan. And then
bigger.
Jalen Wright is bigger than both of them, right? So there's opportunity for these other guys to get involved more so than Achan. And I just think that ADP is rich for Achan right now. I really like him as a player. I get the high upside, especially for best ball, right? I think that's part of it. But I think as we get closer to the NFL season, I can definitely see Mostert and Achan, their ADP the gap starting to close a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm buying the dip here
Yeah.
on Mostert's decrease in ADP. I'm not really sure. It's kind of interesting because like this narrative came out when the team drafted Jalen Wright that like he was coming in to replace Raheem Mostert, but like again, that doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. Yes, he's bigger than Devin Achan, but they still just signed him to a 2-year extension to remain with the team for like none of the narratives make sense surrounding this backfield for me. So yeah, I'm going to be out on HN, but the dip in Raheem Mostert's ADP, I'm just not really understanding the rationale. Like
Mhm.
if you're still buying into Devin Achan at his very much higher price, even despite the fact that like, yeah, Mostert carried 80% of the goal line carries for this team last year. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, it definitely feels like an overreaction here coming out of the draft. And
Even if we see that like that, split, maybe Raheem Mostert sees 60% of the carries.
yeah,
Again, I don't see Achan as a viable goal line option.
no.
But like even if Mostert were to see 60% of those goal line carries, that's more than enough to be a viable flex play on any given week. I just come on,
It's a lot. And yeah,
come
I
on.
mean, HN, it's just the cost, right? Like the risk reward of that cost is high right now. He's basically a late second, early third round pick in drafts right now. Like there's a lot of players with very high upside as well that you're missing on if you're taking a swing on HN. So for that reason, yeah, it's hard to be in on him, I think, at this ADP right now. But yeah, Mostert, I think, is definitely the better bet right now. So that's going to wrap up this episode. We originally planned on going over multiple positions, but we had a lot of running backs to talk about and a lot to say about these running backs. So we're going to call this episode Running Back ADP Risers and Fallers, and we're going to continue it into a part 2 next week, where we'll look at the wide receivers, tight ends, and some quarterbacks as well, who are also ADP risers and fallers. But that is going to do it for this week at least. So thank you everybody for tuning in and or watching on the YouTubes, where we ask that you do please like and subscribe. We'd appreciate that a ton. But Kate, also big thanks to you for helping me break down this list of running back risers and fallers here. Always appreciate your thoughts, and I'm sure the good people do as well. So please remind everyone where they can find more of you and your work.
Yeah, give me a follow on Twitter at Kate Magdziuk. That's Kate Magdziuk. Got a couple of articles out on PFF. Again, I mentioned my 5 bold fantasy football predictions for 2024. Lots of good stuff here in the rotation. So be sure to check that out.
Yes, definitely go check that out. As for me, all my work, again, also on pff.com. This week, I wrote up a rookie quarterback expectations article that looks at past rookie fantasy production as well as current ADP for our rookie quarterbacks, provide some historical comps for these players as well in order to kind of figure out like likely outcomes and whether I can get behind their current ADP or not. So that was a fun one to do, and it's free on pff.com, which you can check out right now. So thank you all again for listening and watching, and until next time,